All right, so here we have the base or the blockout of the texturing process. As you can see, I have tried to kind of like block out the same colors and the same sort of materials as I have in my tiny little sketch in here. Obviously, it's not exactly the same like I mentioned, but it's good enough that you can sort of like say that, yeah, this is kind of like the representation, the 3D representation of this 2D sketch. So that's what I wanted to do. Now, don't worry, I'm going to cover everything. I'm going to give you a breakdown of how I set this tab, but I just want to show you that this is like the starting point of the texturing process. There's a lot more things that we can do, but it's ideal to block out the main materials and the main things that you want to have. And then the rest is just adding, you know, bits and pieces like a bit of damage, dust, wear and tear, maybe add a little bit more details, like I mentioned before with the normal or the height layer. So there's a lot more things that we can do, but it's good to get it to this point that at least every single part has a base material ready. Like I said, don't worry, I'm going to cover everything that I've done in here. So let's go ahead and start with the screens, because as you can see, the main material for most pieces is just the same plastic that I covered in the previous video. So let's go ahead and hold Control, Alt, and right click to select it, and that's the way that you jump between different texture sets. Alt Q to go into focus mode or solo mode. And what I have here is just like some random text that I generated, you know, kind of like a sci-fi thing in a weird caterpillar made out of code or you know, characters in here, and this is all done with the latest version of the Substance 3D Painter, which allows you to drag and drop like text and you can just type it, right? So I'm going to cover the basics and then I'm going to show you how I did that. So let's turn all of this off. The first layer is your base layer, again like we did with the previous material, with the plastic one. This one is determining the properties of the material. So if I select it, it has you know, color, metal, roughness, all of that good stuff, and this is the base layer. Now the second one is just to add a bit of roughness. So I'm going to select that one, and I'm actually going to hold the Alt key to select the mask. So this is the mask of that roughness, and what I've done here is I use the generator, the ambient occlusion that I showed you in the previous video. In fact, we can just reduce a little bit of that blur. There's not that much, right? And then I have the Grunge Leak Dirty. This is one of the textures that come with Painter in here. Leaks, Grunge, one of these ones, this one, right? So I have that one on top and I set it to overlay. So in other words, this texture is being overlaid only where the ambient occlusion is, right? So that's how I get this nice sort of fade between the area that, you know, it should be cleaner in a screen and some areas that would collect dust, for instance, or be more scratchy, right? So we have a nice, very simple setup of some roughness variation and nothing else, right? With a couple of layers. Then I have another one that is just color and roughness, and this color is slightly, you know, brighter than the other one and than the layer that we use as the base, and I set that to overlay. And the way that I combine this is as well using an ambient occlusion, right? So that, you know, if I toggle this on and off, you see it sort of like adds a little bit more of intensity and potentially, you know, just a bit more of saturation to the outside areas of the screen. It's very subtle. If I bring the rest of the object, you'll see it's very, you know, it's very minimal what you see in there. Okay, now the final one, that's the one that has the text. That one has an extra channel called the emissive, which is, as you can see, the only one that I have enabled. At the moment, it doesn't look great, but once we go to rendering, we can just use this layer to generate that sort of like bloom effect around the this, you know, the text basically that is going to be brighter than the rest of the screen. So this one will be a nice effect. So let's go ahead and do something like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and toggle this off. Now the first thing we need to do is create a new layer, right? And we need to enable emissive. So I have it right here. So I'm gonna hold the Alt key and click on emissive. Now by default, emissive is not gonna be available in the basic channels, but all you have to do is go to the texture set settings, and in the channels you can click on this plus icon, and here's where you can add a bunch of other channels that, you know, you can play around with. So the one that I just added is the emissive, so I can just remove it, and if I go back to my layer, now you won't see anything because I don't have an emissive channel anymore. So let's go back in here, click on the plus icon and click on emissive. So now if I go back to what I have, there we go. So we have an emissive channel. I'm gonna turn this off, and let's go ahead and I'm gonna also mark it as green so that you know which one I'm using. All right, so we have the emissive channel. Let's go ahead and set this to be a bright green or yellow color. So you see it's very, very, you know, emissive, very bright. And we can go ahead and mask this out with a black mask. All right, so we basically hid that emissive channel, and in the black mask, we can go ahead and add the text. So let's go ahead and select this T for text, and these are like all the fonts that you might have in your system. Again, it's really cool, really easy thing to do. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use something something like this, Jura Medium maybe. Drag this into the object, and you see this little square that appears. I'm gonna drop it there, and I'm gonna click on mask. Now this is actually going to create a new mask, and you see we have that lorem ipsum. We could do it that way, so you don't really have to create a layer first, but I just want to show you an extra step or an extra thing that you can do in case you want to do this later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this layer and then come back to this one, but you'll see why in a second. So I'm going to select this fill layer that gets created. I'm going to select this icon so that I can move this around. You can also click on rotate and rotate things around like so. And if you select this layer and go to the properties, here's where you can type whatever you want, right? You can do multiple lines. I'm just gonna do something random here just to show you this is how I set it up. All right, but that's pretty much it, right? So we have one layer, and you can always select that layer and you can come back and reposition this whatever you want. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that this is a planar projection or warp projection, so it's only this line. If for some reason you push this accidentally like so, you won't be able to see it because the reach of this projection is based on these arrows. So you can do a couple of things. You can push this back closer, and as I get closer, you'll see how this starts to appear like so. Or you can also use this projection depth. So if you increase that size, you'll see that the arrows increase as well, and that basically increases that projection. So just keep that in mind, but the rest is pretty self-explanatory. You can just move things around. Now, if you want to add something else, let's say around this area, right? What you can do is select maybe a different font. I'm going to take this one, drop it in there, and click on mask. And I'm going to call this one something else. Right, so you can just write whatever you want. This is kind of like showing you the process, and that's it. Okay, I'm gonna rotate this around a little bit and position this like so. Perfect. All right, so that's pretty much it. Now, what I have here is just a couple of layers, and each layer has a mask with a fill layer, and each one of these fill layers has the text effect. So you can have multiple ones. You can have different, text. In fact, let me just do one more because this is kind of like to give you a full idea of what I did. So I'm gonna drag it, click on mask. That will create another layer with another fill, and this is just layer 3, just so you know what I'm referring to. And let's scale this down as well. By the way, another thing you can do, you can just play around with the line spacing, the character spacing. So you can just, there's a lot of things you can do with the text alone. It's really fun to do. So what I've done is I have this original layer, the green one that I mentioned before, that has only the emissive enabled. So this is the whole reason I want to show you this process is because once you finish adding your multiple layers with different text and all of that, all you have to do is take the fill and drop it into the layer. So as you can see, now this is driving the mask of the layer that we set with the emissive, right? And I'm just gonna go ahead and drop all of these fills in there, right? So now I can take all of this, delete it, and now we have in the same layer controlling the same layer controls all of three layers, or all of three text with the emissive channel that we want, or the color we want, and it's controlled with these 3 fill layers. And the cool thing is that you can at some point select whatever you want and type something else, right? So it is non-destructive, and honestly, it's just the easiest way of setting this up. Now, this is pretty much what I've done here. As you can see, I have the same thing, and I have a bunch of different fill layers with different text. So I have this graphic, I have this bead, I have this one. Oh, this one is for this other text, right? So I have like a couple of screens. So that's that one. I have the bead at the bottom, something at the top as a title, and this other bead in here. That's essentially what the screen is and how I build it. All right, so pretty simple stuff once you know the process. So there's nothing too complicated there. Now the next thing are these buttons right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and hold Control Alt and right click on the extras. I'm gonna go into focus or solo mode, and I have a bunch of different materials. Now with the materials in here, when I have them in the same object, or like all of these bits and pieces are part of the same texture set, it's actually really simple. You just need to find the material that you want, or you can build your own materials and simply apply a mask to it. So for instance, if I go to the library here, let's go to the status assets. So all of these assets come with Painter. So let's say if maybe you want to add, I don't know, some kind of like metal sandblasted or metal brush. So I don't know, these objects, instead of being plastic, might be, these dials might be metal. All you have to do is drag and drop this whatever you want, it doesn't matter. So I'm gonna drop it in here. So that's gonna add it at the top of the layer stack. So everything is gonna be metallic now, right? But like if this is the one you want, also let's change it to triplanar, just like I showed you before. So if this is the material that you want, all you have to do is create a black mask for it. Click on the paint effect, right? And the paint effect just allows you to create or to manipulate mask non-destructively. Because if you don't do the paint, it will do it directly into the mask. So with a paint, it's just a lot easier. You can go ahead and select this icon right here, which is the polygon fill. And from this tool, you have a few options. Now, the good thing is that the way that we set this app in 3D Modeler, each one of these objects is literally a separate piece or a separate object. So we can select this selection right here and click once in here. And that is basically selecting every single individual object. There we go. So now only these buttons are this metal. So if I hold the Alt key and click or left click onto the mask, you'll see only these areas are being affected by this metal. That's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and delete that. And that's essentially how I've done all of this. And this one right here is just one of the materials that I downloaded from the Substance 3D assets. And it's pretty cool. And you know, it's just drag and drop and selecting it. This one right here, I think. Again, this one. So it's just a little capsule in there. So very, very simple stuff. So again, nothing too complicated here. Everything that you see here is just, you know, some of these materials, the carbon fiber, I used it in here. So just drag and drop different things. The one that I want to show you the most is these buttons right here, because those buttons are within the sort of like plastic that I set up before. So I have these green layers. Let's turn this off. So this plastic is similar to what I did with the other plastic for the computer, or like this beige sort of base material. So this is just a simple white material made out of a bunch of layers, exactly in the same way that I showed you in the first video the first video about texturing, right? So these all these layers create the complexity of this white material, but you see there's some you know, complexity to it. Is not just a white color. There's some noise and some things happening in here. But the cool thing is that once you have this setup, you can just create a new layer. So I'll show you these ones. That's pretty much what I have here. And you can use the mask tool to select or isolate the different pieces. But it is really simple. So I'm gonna click on a new fill layer, and I'm gonna hold the Alt key and click on color, sorry. And that basically hides everything except the color. So I can go ahead and say, you know what, I wanna make a blue color button for whatever, or a key, right? I can go ahead and set this to overlay. There we go. So it is basically overlaying that color on top of that white material. That's the reason I created those layers in that sort of like desaturated light color, right? So now we have this blue color. We can create a black mask. We can select a paint effect. We can select the polygon fill, and let's say I want to have this one as my blue layer, right? That's it. So now we have that blue layer, but because it is non-destructive, at any point I can go ahead and select that, you know, fill layer, and I'm gonna say, you know what, let's make it a green color, or like a yellow tone or something like that, right? So that's exactly what I've done with the red one. All I'm doing, and with these gray ones and this black one, all I've done here is I changed the color that I'm overlaying on top of the plastic material. And obviously at the end, I group all of those layers within one folder, which can just give it a blue color. And then in this folder, I added a paint effect in the mask, where I basically just use the same thing that I use for just the tool that I just showed you, basically. So I have this paint, and I selected the polygon fill, and I can select only the pieces that I want to include in this folder. So pretty simple stuff. Like I said, once you look at it in, you know, as a whole, it might look a little bit complex, but when you start breaking things down into the smaller pieces, or, you know, the few layers that create a more complex material, is actually rather simple. So I'm gonna wrap up this video by showing you how to set up something like the orb, because that's a cool effect. And then I'm gonna show you how to take advantage of the hide channel and the path tool. So let's go ahead and select this orb first. There we go. Basically, what I'm going to show you how to set up is this effect of translucency, right? So we have this orb that is translucent, and then when we get to the rendering, we will be able to add this like nice effect. So this is like in reference to some of the stuff that I collected. If I bring in my reference here, so this type of stuff. So it's like a yellow or like orange type of acrylic on top. That's kind of like what I'm trying to go for, but maybe more like a yellow tone. And then we have this other bead that is the blue one, and the combination of the two should give us like some kind of like green color. So basically, let me turn this off. You can start with a color like this, right? Any color that you want, but you see I have a couple of extra channels. So the ones that you want to enable to be able to add a little bit of color or tint to the glass, if you will, or anything that is transparent, is the absorption color as well as the translucency. So you can go to texture set settings and click on this icon and add them from here. So you see I have translucency and absorption color. So again, those are two things that I just added by clicking on the icon here and added. The same thing as I did with the emissive. So once you have those channels, let's turn everything off. Actually, sorry. Let's go back to this layer, go back to properties. So I'm gonna turn everything off except the transparency and the absorption. Okay, so we now have two channels that have one where we can control how transparent things are going to be, like so. And then how, what's the tint, what's the color that is being absorbed when light goes through this glass. So you can leave it as white if it's just gonna be a normal glass or transparent glass, or you can just select a color like so, right? So now I have, actually, I don't mind that color, that's pretty cool. And you see it's pretty opaque, right? So we can also enable roughness now and control the amount of roughness that we want. So we can do something like this. And of course, you can make things a little bit more complex, right? And this is kind of like an introduction to how you can take advantage or use the height map. So let's go ahead and click on the texture, and I'm gonna type scratches. And I'm gonna select these scratches, drop it in there, and I'm gonna click on mask. Remember, that is going to be an effect that is going to apply this texture as a mask into a new layer. Obviously, it's doing it just as a warp projection, so I'm just gonna change that to triplanar. There we go. And then from here, we can control a bunch of things like the balance, so how much of these scratches we wanna have. I think I wanna keep it simple, something like this. The quantity, sorry. Maybe we can blur them a little bit, add a bit of width to those scratches. And I think that's looking pretty good. And then I'm gonna select this layer, and this is basically the scratch layer. And I'm gonna make sure that I only have the roughness enabled as well as the height. So the roughness, we wanna push it all the way to 0, just with the idea that, you know, if something gets scratched, usually reveals more of the original material, so more of a glass, clean material. And then the height, I'm just gonna push it back a bit. So you see now we have these really nice sort of like scratches happening in the orb. Again, super subtle stuff, but I think it just adds another level of complexity. Right, so this might be a little bit too much, so I'm gonna knock it down to 4 or 0.04. You see, it's very subtle stuff. But as I rotate the environment, which is, by the way, shift and right click, you can really see the effect of those tiny scratches. All right, so that is what I wanted to show you. So before we move on into the final part of the texturing of this asset, I want to show you how to use the path tool and the height map so that you can add, like I said, a bunch of extra details and a bunch of extra stuff into your object. So let's go ahead and select this section, for example, right? And what I'm going to do is, let's collapse this. This is the material. I'm going to click on a new layer. And this layer, I'm going to make it very bright, just red or blue, any color that is very easy to see. And I'm also going to turn everything off except the color and enable the height map, right? So we're going to just deal with these two things for the time being. All right, so now let's go ahead and create a black mask. And in that black mask, I'm going to create a paint effect. So we basically hid that blue color, or that mask is hiding the blue color, and the paint is where we're going to start painting. So if you select this brush right here, you can literally start painting and reveal that portion of the layer, right, with this paint. So I'm going to undo that because I don't want to do it like that. I want to have a bit more control and keep things a bit more non-destructive in a way. So I'm going to select this tool here, which is the path tool, or paint along path tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to recreate this shape right here, something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start maybe from here, and I'm just going to click once and then click twice And then let's go ahead and click again here. Don't worry, we're gonna fix that in a second. I'm just gonna set kind of like my Bezier points. It's not gonna be perfect, but we'll fix it. I just want to show you the you know, how cool this is in terms of the non-destructive workflow. All right, this here at the bottom, you won't see it anyway. All right, so we just have a simple path, but of course doesn't look great. So what you can do is double click any of these points, and that would convert them from a Bezier point into a sharp point. So double click, you see now we have a sharp point, and I'm gonna have another one there, and another one there, and another one there. So I can just go ahead and pull and reposition this. I'm gonna do the same thing in here and in here and here as well. There we go. Just in case, because this is a little bit, is not following the path necessarily, so I'm gonna create another point in there. Double click on it, and I'm gonna push it closer. That is because I put this this point in that sort of like rounded area, so it didn't know exactly what the plane was. All right, so that, I think that looks pretty good. All right, so that's nice, but you know, it's a little bit faded and doesn't really look like a panel. But this is the beauty of this non-destructive workflow, because again, this is in a pane layer, and this path tool, as long as you have it selected, if I go ahead and click on this path, you have it selected here. I'm actually gonna double click and call it a panel, just so I know which one it is. Right? You can go ahead and tweak it a bit. So again, you have to have it selected, and I'm just gonna click on the size, and you see how I can change that on the fly. So that is really, really powerful, right? So all I have to do is just, you know, select it and change it. You can even change the alpha, so if you wanna have like stitches or something like that for a fabric. But in our case, I think this is doing a great job as a panel. All right, so going back to what I was saying before, if I go ahead and turn off the color, just so that you can see there's nothing visible, I can play just with this hide information. So I'm gonna push it in. There we go, and you see it's just creating that nice sort of like indentation in there as a panel. Now, if I add the color, of course, I can just, you know, select something a little bit darker, maybe not too much. And again, because it is not destructive, I can select back my path. So let's select the path, and we can go and make it a bit smaller, like so. And we have additional details. Now, this is the great thing about it, that you can just go ahead and do all of this stuff in Painter. And again, it's non-destructive, and you don't have to deal with this piece being a geometry part, or like having additional polygons in the geometry. All of this is happening at the texture level, and you can still come back, select it, and, you know, maybe edit it and say, you know what, I want this to be more like that. I can push these points down. So I'll spend a bit more time sort of like tweaking this and make sure that it looks nice. But I just wanted to show you the how simple the workflow is. It's just a simple layer that has color and hide in the negative values. You can also push it forward if you wanted to, and that's pretty much it. There's no trick behind it. One more thing you can do is you can create another layer, again, just to reiterate the process. I'm gonna isolate the hide and the color. I'm gonna add a new mask, and in the mask I'm gonna add a paint layer. You can also, with this brush selected, let's go ahead and actually go for a simpler brush. In the brush library, I'm gonna select this one. You'll see that we have this alpha, right? So you can change the alpha. So you can go here and maybe add this alpha, just drag it and drop it in here, and just, you know, increase your brush size. You can do that by holding Control and right click like so, and then you can just go ahead and click once, and that's it. So that adds this alpha, and we can do the same thing we did with the panel. We can push this maybe forward, and then maybe add a tiny bit of color, something that makes sense. I don't know, like a yellowish tone, right? So this is another hide information detail that we can take advantage of, and add all of those details all over the, you know, I mean, not all over the concept, but this is how easy it is to add this type of things. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with those tiny details, and I'll see you in the next video.